Welcome, everyone. This is Faith in Marriage Today. I'm Jason Angelette.
I'm Dr. Mario Sacasa. Happy to be here with you guys.
It's great to be with you guys. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So on Monday, this past Monday, we heard the Supreme Court struck down this law that Louisiana had put together to protect women, to try to help to curb this, I guess, evil of abortion in our country, especially in our United States. We had in our own state, Louisiana, it was a bipartisan bill or law, right, that was signed by a Democratic governor, and it was brought to the Supreme Court, and it was knocked down. To talk more about this, to kind of hear more about what happened leading up to it, what was going on, and what do we look forward towards in the future? How do we move past this? How do we move beyond this decision? And what have we learned from it? We have with us Angie Thomas and Benjamin Clapper, both from the Louisiana Right to Life. Great to be with you guys. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful.
So right out of the gate, tell us, okay, so what was it that was on the table? What was the law that we're talking about? Specifically, how did it get there? Why was it on the books? Why were we trying to do this? What was the heart of it?
Ben, why don't you go ahead and lead us with that?
All right, sure. So in 2014, we in our office started, together with Dorinda Borley of the Bioethics Defense Fund, really began to formulate and consider this as a law. We have seen many privileged laws go in other states, so we began to look and see if this is needed in Louisiana. You know, for years we've heard about women being hurt in abortion facilities in Louisiana. How about these abortion facilities really didn't care about women? It was really their for-profit pursuit to make sure that they perform as many abortions as possible and move the women out as soon as possible. We heard about complications happening in these abortion facilities, you know, women being hurt by these abortionists. And we heard and saw and researched all the violations, health violations that these abortion facilities have gone through. I mean, if a fast food place operated like an abortion facility operated, the places would be closed. They did abortions with they didn't sterilize their instruments between abortions. They didn't have IV fluids. They didn't do patient records correctly. It just, the list goes on in Louisiana's abortion facilities. These places were not the rosy, lovely aspects that the pro-choice movement wants you to believe. These were awful places in Louisiana. And then we saw also this giant loophole. In Louisiana, if you do an outpatient surgery anywhere else but abortion, you have to have admitting privileges at a local hospital, which means that when a woman has a complication at your facility, she can go to the hospital and that physician can go to the hospital with that patient and handle the complication there instead of relying on some ER doctor at the hospital to reassess that patient, figure out what's going on, and then handle the situation. It's about continuity of care and a doctor having responsibility for their patients. But in reality, all the abortion facilities would do is just call 911. An ambulance would come, pick the woman up, they would wash their hands and move on to the next abortion. That was not acceptable in Louisiana or anywhere in our nation. And it was not just, yes, it was about protecting the health and safety of the woman, but I mean, goodness, abortion industry shouldn't have this loophole, this special treatment in our nation. And sadly, the Supreme Court has upheld that loophole for abortion businesses. It's like the Abortion Protection Agency in America today.
It's like we're blind to life and we're bloodthirsty for the killing of the unborn. I mean, it's crazy, even with the COVID-19, how there was just so many, things granted to the abortion facilities that other facilities didn't have to, they didn't have to do the same kind of restrictions and things. They were wide open to do their business. It's like blind. It's like, looking at this, you're like, why can't you just see that, look, this is the pro-life cause being pro-woman and trying to, if you're going to have this abortion thing, if you really are sincere in saying you want it safe, rare, and few times, it's like, how is this work? Angie, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, just yesterday I was interviewed, and they interviewed an abortion advocate after me. And when you say blind, it just reminds me of that feeling I had yesterday. I just felt like she had scales on her eyes. Like, she actually didn't even really know the law. She said that this was targeting abortion clinics and that they were trying to make abortion clinics do more than other surgical centers, which is absolutely not the case. This is just simply bringing abortion clinics up to the standard, the basic standard of care that we have asked every other outpatient surgical center for. So it's really frustrating. And I mean, Ben just gave an amazing image of what these clinics look like. I want our audience to know that abortion clinics in this state have had radiologists and ophthalmologists performing abortions.
Mm-hmm.
Would anyone think that that's acceptable? We as Christians, we as pro-life people, we have to get the word out now. If the Supreme Court's not going to let us do this basic common sense law, then it's up to us. We have to get the word out that these clinics are not even up to basic standards. They have violation after violation.
So, Angie, just take us a step further. So we know what the law is. We know what the intention for the law was. Why did the Supreme Court rule against the law? What was the decision? What was the rationale behind the decision that was laid on Monday?
Well, especially Chief Justice Roberts, he went with the concept of stare decisis, meaning that what is like laws need to be treated alike, and he felt like the law was too similar to Texas's to be upheld. And of course, the four liberal judges, in their majority opinion or plurality opinion, they just went with that this is an undue burden on women, and it restricts access to abortion for women. So that's what they said. Now, when you look at the dissent, you look at the more logical side of it. It's really looking at this is a common sense law, and I love what Justice Thomas said about how the entire jurisprudence of abortion is simply illegitimate law. It simply doesn't make sense.
Now, Ben, let me ask you this then, because we were talking about this before. Like, Robert's, my understanding, again, I'm just a person who follows the news. I'm not involved in this as much as either of you are. But my understanding is that Roberts was on the dissenting side of the Texas law 4 years ago, but then now voted on the majority side because of his standard of precedence. It seems like for him, precedence is what matters more than just about anything else. So he voted in favor of it this time precisely because the court ruled against it last time. Am I understanding that correctly? Or what was, I mean, who can understand his mind, so to speak, but what was it that kind of made him switch his vote this time around?
Well, it's interesting. He wrote a concurrence with the plurality of the majority, so it gets really kind of complicated. But
sorry, explain that. What is that? What does that mean?
Sure. So there have to be 5 justices to get a majority. Well, 4 liberal pro-abortion justices, who we knew we had already lost going into it, wrote a decision together, and then Roberts wrote his own that he concurred with their result, but not really their reasoning. So he becomes the guiding majority thought for the future precedent. Mm-hmm. So to say he joined them fully is not fully the case, but his decision is the reason our law is struck down, without a doubt. You know, he believed that it was too close, basically, I think in proximity of time, with the Texas law being struck down in 2016. Of course, it's amazing because since Roberts has been on the court, he's voted to overturn precedent 17 times on the bench.
Which is 81% of the time.
That's right.
He had an opportunity.
That's right. So, I mean, for us, we look at it and say, okay, well, if stare decisis and precedent is that big of a deal to you that you would reverse yourself in 4 years, then keep it consistent across the board. The problem with his decision for constitutional scholars, I believe, is that there was very little logic by how he applied precedent in this situation. His first paragraph of his concurrence said that I still disagree with the holdings in Hellerstedt, which was the 2016 case, but because of precedent, I overturn it. Now, what we were talking about earlier, Mario, is that he went on in his decision to basically eviscerate the 2016 Hellerstedt decision. So he upheld precedent, yet he destroyed the precedent in the process, and we are left without a law in place that was supported by the overwhelming majority of Louisianians and our legislature. So it was really disappointing. You know, we worked for years through presidential elections, through Senate elections, to put Supreme Court justices on the bench who are going to help us fight the abortion industry, who are going to see the Constitution as not something that's there for the protection of the abortion industry. We thought we could count to 5, and we lost Justice Roberts. We got to keep fighting. We got to get that next vote on the Supreme Court.
Now is there? Sorry, Jason. So I appreciate you guys explaining that for me, and him not saying he just aligned with them, but he had his own concurrence. He had his own opinion that, in actuality, kind of sets a new precedent moving forward. So
Right.
Is that because I read an article on Slate.com, which is that comes up on my Apple News feed, that basically and this is from the liberal side of the author, was like, listen, let's not call him a liberal. What he has basically done is, even though he struck down this law, he's opened up, and this is again what the author's saying, so help me understand this, guys, that he opened up a pathway for future laws, or for future pro-life laws to come into play. That it almost seems like, again, as a layperson, the way I'm interpreting what happened is kind of like a judge is is ruling on a murder case, and the defense has something that they did something that was just a lack of procedure, and so basically in a lack of procedure, the judge rules that the guy is free to go, although he knows that the person was guilty. But by doing that, it sets up a stage for future kind of laws to come into place that follow the appropriate procedure. Am I making sense? Is this the right way of interpreting what happened in terms of just trying to find some silver lining in this? What do you think, Angie?
Yeah, I mean, there really is a silver lining, because when you look at Supreme Court decisions, you have to look at the tests that they create. So it's, the facts are always different, right? But the Supreme Court utilizes elements or tests to determine, to come to conclusions. And so, like Ben said, that Hellerstedt case from 2016 put forth an almost impossible threshold for pro-life regulations to pass. And so it was a balancing test, if you will. The states who wanted to regulate abortion had to prove that there was a benefit, a major benefit to the woman. Well, that's pretty tough to do when you know that there are doctors out there who are willing to say, oh, there's no benefit to admitting privileges, or, it depends on what side of the issue you're on, right? So what this did, like Ben said, it eviscerated that particular test. And so now we're back to the 1992 threshold, which is that famous case, Planned Parenthood versus Casey. I'm sure some of the listeners have heard of that case. That was a big moment in this battle. Mm-hmm. So we're back to that, and that's a much easier threshold. So I think the best way to understand this is that after that 2016 Hellerstedt case, the pro-choice advocates, the pro-abortion advocates, challenged almost every basic pro-life law in this state. They
basically saying that every pro-life law would be undue burden on the woman's access to reproductive health. That's what they said.
And these were really common sense laws, like informed consent, that the woman should know what is going to happen to her, like the ultrasound requirement, that the woman should be able to see how far along she is and what the reality of her womb. Some other ones, like trafficking victims, like modest regulations to ensure that trafficking victims aren't continuously brought in. All of these things were being challenged. With this case, with the particular wording that Roberts chose to use, we believe that those laws are safe now. Okay. So I love the way Ben put it in our press release. We may have lost that particular law, but we gained ground for the pro-life movement in the nation.
So, I think the wording used in the article was reverse engineering. So, taking from what happened here, there's going to be a new path that's kind of laid down for y'all to be able to figure out maybe a strategy or a better plan to kind of help address this issue, right?
That's right. Always hope, right, Mario?
Yeah, always hope. Go ahead, Ben.
I just remember the Supreme Court paths are not very clear, and because when you get back to the court 5, 6, 7 years later, whenever you get a case to go before the court has changed probably. It's so contingent on presidential elections right now that it's kind of like it's a moving target sometimes. And so much of it depends on timing. Just keep this in mind. If this court that ruled the case on Monday had been the court that ruled the Texas case in 2016, we would have won, and our situation today would be dramatically different of where we are. But it's all based on timing, the way things fall at the right time. I mean, we're proud of our Attorney General that he pushed for this law forward and sent it back to the court because we had the numbers, we had the chance. Roberts made the wrong decision. He almost made precedent higher than the Supreme Court or than the Constitution of our country, right? He put that precedent so high. And so who really knows what that means in the future? Sometimes it's hard to read Roberts and what he's going to say. But, look, we're going to do everything that we can to keep protecting unborn life, to keep fighting the abortion industry, to make sure that they can't have their say, and make sure that we can protect women in the process. And I hope the case gets to the Supreme Court soon with a new justice, hopefully, that's on our side, and we can see an even greater change because it's time. The delay's too much, almost 50 years. We got to make some change.
So speaking of specifically of what that change is, what does that look like now? Like, so this law just got shut down. Mm-hmm. What's the next step for y'all? What's the next step for us? Like, what can we, the voters, what can we do to help to bring about a stronger pro-life movement than ever before?
Well, in this great state of Louisiana that is so pro-life, we have a perfect opportunity to do just that. So the narrative right now has been about the judicial branch, right? And it's really disturbing when you can't trust the judicial branch to do what they were meant to do, which is to simply interpret the law. So sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands, right? And that's what a constitutional amendment does, that the voices of this state can be heard through a constitutional amendment. And so for years now, the team at Louisiana Right to Life has been working towards this constitutional amendment and polling. And this fall, you will have the opportunity to vote on a constitutional amendment that states that Louisiana's Constitution includes no right to abortion, nor the right to the funding of abortion. So we'll be able to all vote on that, and we just need to win by a simple majority, which is, I think, hopefully will be easy in this pro-life state. So it's a big deal, and we finally get to have our voices heard through that. So we're, again, very hopeful.
So how does that then play? Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, that's on the state level, and federally at the same time, we're going to have a presidential election. And I think, people can have many different opinions about the president and who's running for office and all that. One part about this Supreme Court decision that was hopeful is President Trump's two Supreme Court justices, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, were with the pro-life side on this decision. And we're optimistic that their decisions this week it could point the way towards them for decades siding with us on these matters. And it's not just that they somehow owe allegiance to the pro-life cause. They see that it makes common sense that you let a state put its own laws in place, that this is constitutional, right? So I think people need to really pay close attention to what justices are making what decision, what presidents they come from, and keep that in mind moving forward. President Trump and Vice President Biden have very stark differences on who they're going to be putting on the bench as Supreme Court justice. That's something that people need to talk about, be aware about. I know it can be uncomfortable sometimes, but it's so important.
Yeah, I think that, so what you're saying is something also that's kind of played into my mind over the course of this week is that where is the balance of power between the federal and the state level? I mean, don't the states have certain rights in terms of being able to say that in our state, we think that these are the laws or the ways that we want to interpret whatever right to abortion means, going back to Roe versus Wade, but being able to put the certain parameters that we feel protects our citizens in Louisiana versus a state like New York or Oklahoma or Florida, wherever, whoever else has the right to be able to make those interpretations for their own states. Do the implications of these two cases, both the Texas and this, have broader implications beyond the pro-life movement, but just even in terms of the contention between the federal limits of power and the states' rights to be able to legislate laws that are best for their citizens? Angie, what do you think?
I think that's really what we saw in some of the dissents, is that, this is really a state issue. I love how you said that, Mario. The states have the sovereignty of the state to protect its people and to implement laws that do that. And so really this entire realm should be in the state's power. Now, of course, we ideally we would want the right to life, the basic right to life,
Sure, of
to be
course.
understood as, met in our Constitution with the right to, to life. But in the meantime, we're certainly fighting for the states to be able to regulate abortion. So that's really where it should be. And I think we're seeing a bit of a movement in that with this case. I don't know that it has direct implications.
Okay. Ben, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, well, we call it the abortion distortion, right? That abortion somehow has had, it's people have been treating it, judges have been treating it with kid gloves for almost 50 years. Roe v. Wade took an issue that should have been in the states and has taken it out of the states. And that's part of the travesty of Roe v. Wade, and that states really have their hands tied of what they can and can't do. The amendment, the Love Life Amendment Angie's talking about, is really to prepare Louisiana for a day when we have no Roe v. Wade, so that we can make sure that state courts can't do to us what the federal courts have done. We don't want to learn that lesson twice, right? Shame on us if it happens, or shame on them. Well, I can't remember. But,
Yeah, we got you. We're good.
We got you. Thank you, Mario. So, but we have to make sure that on the state level we cover every base that we can, and then work hard on the federal level to get this sent back to the states. Because right now, Mario, your idea of making this a states issue, that's what we want, but the Supreme Court is keeping us from that right now.
Yeah, but I guess I'm sorry to press this a little bit more, but my concern, of course, is beyond just the issue of abortion, because now we've seen, even with the gay marriage situation, which again, people debate one way or the other, but for the longest time, the argument was always that let the states decide, let the states decide. I think even in when with Bush and Gore going back to 2000, I mean, these are the debates that were said. Let the states decide. Let the states decide. So the states decided, and then 30 out of the 50 states decided that they wanted marriage to be defined between a man and a woman, because it's the state that ultimately issues the marriage license. You don't get a federal license when you get married. You go to the clerk of courts at your county that's a representative of your state. But then that didn't last, and that was eviscerated, with the decision that was made in 2015, whatever it was at this point. And so now we're seeing kind of a repeat trend of this, that beyond whether you agree with abortion or a gay marriage or whatever, but just looking at this as a citizen, wondering again, well, what does the state even exist? Like, what is even the role of the state in our country? That, I don't know, that's probably a broader conversation, but that's my concern kind of moving forward and wanting to reclaim
It's
some
an
of that.
abuse of power of the judicial branch. It's the judicial branch making policy. That's not what they're there for. That's what the legislative branch is there for. So even if it was federal law, it still shouldn't be the judges being activists on the bench. And that's really that is the broader topic here.
Okay.
Well, guys, I can't thank y'all enough for your time. We definitely want to have y'all back on, talk more about this, especially as we get close to election time with the love. What was the bill that you mentioned? The thing.
The Love Life Amendment.
Do you guys have a minute? Maybe you want to talk about that,
Yeah.
and why is that important? Again, you're saying the state, we're going to have the opportunity to vote an amendment about the right to life, but I think, but obviously Roe v. Wade is a federal mandate,
Yeah.
so we fall underneath that. So what is the value then? Help us to explain what the value is for us voting yes to something that can't even take in full effect until the federal law changes. Ben, help us understand why we should vote yes on that.
Well, in 13 other states, their state Supreme Courts have basically made a mini Roe v. Wade decision, striking down more pro-life laws in their individual states. So, for example, in 2019 in Kansas, it happened, so that they passed a pro-life law. Their state Supreme Court, even though the word abortion is not found in the Kansas Constitution, which I'm sure everyone's read the Kansas Constitution before, but
Read
trust
last
me,
night,
the word
actually,
abortion is
preparation.
not there. But the state Supreme Court of Kansas still decided that there was a right to abortion in the Kansas Constitution, just like in Roe v. Wade. Well, what we want to make sure is that can't happen in Louisiana. So it has a twofold effect. Number one, it protects our law from state judges right now. All of our laws, informed consent, ultrasound, heartbeat laws, but also in the future, when Roe v. Wade comes down, which we hope sooner rather than later, then this will ensure that our 2006 trigger law is what we call it, which means that when Roe v. Wade's overturned, abortion would be illegal in Louisiana, but this constitutional amendment would make sure that it remains illegal in Louisiana after the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And Mario, Jason, I would say it's a third thing with what we've seen with New York really flying, turning the Empire State Building pink, celebrating abortion. This is a way for Louisiana to celebrate life. By us coming together and voting on this, getting 60 or 70% of Louisianians to agree on this, I mean, that's going to help send a message to our nation that the Supreme Court can say all at once, but this is what we believe in Louisiana. This is what we know in Louisiana, and we're going to fight for it. And it's going to be important because pro-abortion groups, just like they fought us at the Supreme Court, we believe they're coming into Louisiana, putting money into our state, and trying to stop this amendment. They'd love to pick up a win in a state like Louisiana. So it's going to really be incumbent upon everyone to work together in their church, in their community, to talk about this, to pass this. In the Catholic community, the bishops are supporting this. They're going to be encouraging advocacy on this within Catholic parishes and institutions. We just have about 4 months until the vote. So it may seem like a long time, but it's going to go fast. And especially with churches closed or in this pseudo state of being open, it's going to be incumbent even more upon each of us to use social media, to talk to our friends, text our friends, to tell them to take action and vote yes.
Yeah, definitely want to echo what you just said, Ben. That's awesome. Go ahead, Angie.
If any of our listeners want to help us get the word out, please don't hesitate to email me. I think our email addresses will be on the bottom of this. So please contact us if you want to help us get the word out, because we have to get this out statewide into all the rural areas as well. Make sure every pro-life person knows what they're voting for. It doesn't just gloss over that ballot initiative, but knows that this is their chance to really take a stance for the pro-life movement.
Yeah, we definitely need to be vocal. We need to be informing our friends, our families. We need to make our votes count. Silence is violence, and we need to be able to stand up strong on this. And Louisiana is a strong pro-life state, if not one of the most pro-life state in the United States. And so we're so thankful for the work that y'all are doing. And again, I guess if anybody wants to find more information, they can go to prolifelouisiana.org. Is that correct?
Yes, and for our amendment, they can also go to lovelifevoteyes.com. Lovelifevoteyes.com. That's our homepage just about the amendment, where people can get more information, sign up, donate everything that they can do to support the amendment.
Sounds great.
Excellent job, guys. Thank y'all so much again.
Thank you guys
We'll
for
love to
doing
have
this.
y'all back
Thanks,
on
guys.
soon. And thank you for this time.
Thank
And Mario, that's our show for
That's it.
today. So we're
That's good.
looking forward to being in studio next week. We've got some great guests next couple weeks, right?
Yeah. We're looking forward to getting back talking about racial injustice, and we're going to have some guests, local leaders, community leaders, to help us be able to talk more about that, about what we can do to respond to the racial inequalities that we're facing in our country.
All right, guys. Thanks again so much for watching. Leave your comments, questions below if you have any, and we look forward to seeing y'all next time. God bless.
God bless everybody.